All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Innovation Heroes, where we tap into the minds of innovation leaders from around the world to get inspiration to drive our own innovation goals. I'm your host, Adam Olsen from HeroX, and I want to thank you for tuning in. We're especially excited about this episode because our guest has been a crucial contributor to the HeroX community over the years. We are here with special guest Fred Briggs, President and CEO of Applied Impact Robotics, to discuss how he and his team have won multiple prize challenges and how those led to crucial industry relationships and propelling his company's growth. Applied Impact Robotics was formed after winning the Chrysalix PETRONAS Incentive Challenge hosted on HeroX. This challenge was searching for safe and economically viable solutions to inspect the tank bottoms of above-ground storage tanks without any interruption in service and requiring no human entry. So welcome, Fred. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us today. Before we get started, could you maybe dive a little bit deeper into your background and the road that's led you to where you and your team are today?
Yeah, first, Adam, thanks so much for having me here. It's really exciting to be here and share our story here. So yeah, a little bit about my background. I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years. Most of my work deals with sort of early stage, high risk innovation. The things I'm really interested and passionate about sort of generally revolve around drones, robotics, and Internet of Things devices. I'd been working a lot as doing consulting work, everything from Fortune 500 companies to Army's Applied Research Lab to, startup companies doing a lot of early stage innovation. And that was sort of how I got started in all of this. And, really from there, about 10 years ago, I got involved with a group who was looking to crowdsource some innovation and drone technology to try and stop rhino poaching in South Africa. So some friends and I kind of formed a group and said, this is really interesting to us. We love this technology. How can we leverage it to do something really useful and good in the world? And that was kind of my introduction to innovation challenges and what really sparked everything for me. And from there, we actually built on that a little bit, and we actually created a small nonprofit called Empower to Make. And what we did is actually bring in people with physical disabilities and built teams around these people and ran a 72-hour make-a-thon to try and help improve some aspect of their life. So an example was a young man who was born with just one hand. He was in middle school, wanted to play violin, and but wasn't capable of holding the bow, and so 3D printed a prosthetic and attachment so he could play the violin. Another young man who is in middle school as well had cerebral palsy, so teacher would always say, okay, if anyone has any questions, raise your hand. But he physically couldn't, and so he'd have to like interrupt the teacher, and so came up with some solutions for him in his wheelchair so that he could sort of signal to the teacher that he had an answer. And so that was sort of the next phase of it. And after that, I really started actively seeking out some of these innovation challenges that could, do some good in the world, and that was sort of what brought me to HeroX and all the fantastic challenges that you have.
That's incredible. So you were, helping these kids through their problems in just like a matter of a few days with the teams you'd bring around them?
Yeah, so we would piece together, we would bring the folks in, the need knowers that had the issues, sort of identify one issue in their life that they would like a team to work on, because obviously there's lots of challenges that they're going to face all over. But we would sort of niche it down to one thing that we could focus on, and then we put together a team of doctors, engineers, programmers, and run the whole thing as a 72-hour sort of innovation challenge, and just sort of plow through 72 hours and see what we come up with. And so it was amazing what you can do when you have motivated teams and this powerful story with motivated people to what they can do. And so some amazing things came out of that.
Yeah, and like just having the person that you're supporting and helping like in the room to really drive that as well.
Yeah.
So were these projects that were just kind of to help that one specific individual, or did these turn into products that you eventually went to market with?
None of them really went to market. Some of them sort of caught a little bit of attention and in small scale. For example, there was one where if you have like an oxygen bottle, you have some sort of respiratory issues, and you have the nasal cannula. What happens is if you're walking around your home, you may have one that's 50 feet long, and what can happen is you're walking around, the cord can get snagged on something that kind of yanks your head back, and that's pretty obnoxious. And so one of the teams actually developed sort of this little magnetic clip for the whole thing, and so if it got snagged on something, it would just break the magnetic thing. And so that one actually became quite popular, and some of the groups are just taking some magnets and 3D printing all the parts for it, and sort of doing something with it. But it's interesting that with physical disabilities, there's certain disabilities that are quite common and they're well served, but then there's a lot of disabilities that are so unique and so niche that they're not really served. And so that's really the space we were trying to play in, is all of these underserved disabilities that weren't served by the broader market. So there wasn't really a broader market for most of them. We were trying to help that individual with that problem specifically for them.
Right. Well, that's an incredible initiative. And, I really admire, your persistence and drive to solve those problems, even though there's not like a huge market for the product. You're really just doing it to support these specific people that you felt have been underserved. But fantastic that this road of open innovation that you've been on has led you to HeroX, because I know you've been quite successful on our platform with multiple challenges. Maybe you could share a little bit about the two that you've contributed to on our platform.
Yeah, so the one that's really taken off for us, as you mentioned early on, is the PETRONAS Chrysalix challenge. It's specifically focused on crude oil holding tanks. And so a little bit of background on that is crude oil holding tanks, they're absolutely enormous. They're as much as 300-foot diameter, as much as 8 stories tall. So they're huge. And as a result of how much crude oil they have, it's obviously an environmental problem if they have corrosion issues and start leaking this into the earth. So they're federally required to have these tanks internally inspected for corrosion integrity every 10 years. And the problem with that is traditionally the way you inspect them is you drain out all the oil out of the tank, but crude oil also has a lot of sludge and sediment in it. So what happens is 300-foot diameter, something like a football field easily fits inside of this, right? So it's huge. And there's easily 1 to 2 feet, maybe 3 feet worth of sludge and sediment left. Imagine a football field of 3 feet of toxic sludge and sediment. So when you crack the tank open and send people into there, now you've got dangerous confined space entry. You're just emitting all kinds of really nasty VOCs into the atmosphere. And then it takes, months to manually extract all of this sludge and sediment and then do the environmental remediation on it. So it's bad in a whole lot of ways. So really what we're focused on is developing a robotic solution. We can just inject a robot into the tank, leave the sludge and sediment right where it is, and then have a robot operate in the sludge and sediment, get to the bottom and do all of the integrity readings while the tank is still in service. And so that, dramatically improves performance, the safety performance, dramatically improves the environmental impact. And so that's really what we've been focused on. And as we've been developing that solution, the Bureau of Reclamation also came up with a challenge called imperfection detection, where they were looking to do fiberglass reinforced pipe inspection. And one of the key challenges there was also all the biofouling. So traditional sensors that might do all the scanning work great, but then you get all the crud associated with the pipes. Well, suddenly the sensors don't work well anymore. And that's sort of the key technology that we had been developing for the crude oil tanks is, how do you operate a sensor in this really nasty, sludgy environment? And so we sort of carried forward that technology, brought it to that challenge as well, and were able to secure a win in the Bureau of Reclamation challenge as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you really only had to make some kind of minor tweaks to what you were already working on.
Exactly. Yeah. So in crude oil tanks, it's a steel plate that we're doing the inspection on. But again, the
Mhm.
key issue is sort of mitigating that sludge and sediment, and then trying to transition it over to fiberglass plates, fiberglass pipes,
Right.
and remediate the biofouling. Yeah.
So, that was obviously the more recent challenge
Yep.
with the fiberglass pipes. Are you still, is your main focus still kind of with the original challenge you won with the steel tanks?
Yeah, with the steel tank, so we've got a lot of traction with that. So what's happened since the win on HeroX, which was somewhere, it was in 2019,
Mhm.
November of 2019, I believe. So since then, we took that money, did some early stage prototyping with it to sort of
Mhm.
demonstrate that some of our concepts could work. From there, we actually had got a lot of traction with Chrysalix Venture Capital and did a seed round of funding for 1.25 million in February 2021. So that sort
Okay.
of launched things. So from there, we were able to get an R&D office in Sterling, Virginia. We were able to
Uh,
hire on some engineers, business development folks. And so since then, I think cumulatively we've raised around $2.5 million since
wow.
that start. And we now have public partnerships with both BP and Chevron, and we're pretty close to doing our first pilot programs later this year with that technology. So it's really taken off for us.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So that 2.5 million, is that including what you've won through prize challenges, or is that
Yeah,
on
so
top of
not
that?
not all of that is dilutive. So we've
Yeah.
done on top of that first prize, probably another $250,000 in additional prizes like the imperfection
Mhm.
detection and various other grant opportunities. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, um, are you able to share a little bit about kind of the technology that you're creating to navigate through the sludge and
Yeah.
what you have to do to kind of adapt to those harsher
Yeah.
environments?
So multiple companies tried to operate in this environment with like tank tread robots or something with wheels, maybe wheels with magnets, something along those lines. And they
Mhm.
essentially tried to brute force the robot through the sludge and sediment, and that just didn't work. And so the approach we took is that the sludge and sediment is just too thick. You can't brute
Mhm.
force your way through it. You have to fundamentally change the viscosity of it in some way.
Mm.
And there's chemicals that will do that, but they don't want you introducing chemicals because that messes up the product, and then they can't use it at the
Right.
refinery. So really what we're doing is we're taking the robot and we're pulling oil from higher in the tank and taking that lighter viscosity fluid and bringing it down to the robot, flooding that around the robot, and then actually vibrating the shell of the robot. And this is taking that hard packed material and sort of vibrating it apart. And as those particles vibrate apart, the lighter fluid flows in between those particles and allows that particle to
Um,
move around quite easily. And the phenomenon is known as liquefaction. And so
mhm.
we've been able to show that we can actually reduce the viscosity by about as much as 80% doing this.
Wow.
And by doing that, and then our robot is built more like a submarine. It kind of has these augers in the front and the augers in
Mhm.
the back. And by creating this reduced viscosity around it, we can kind of auger and pull our way through the material. And we can actually sort of move that pocket of reduced viscosity around with us, and then just sort of burrow our way through the material and then deliver the sensor where we need to.
Interesting. So that's like in my mind, that's so creative. That's something that seems like, it's obviously never really been tested or done before. What was your process like coming up with that? Did you have a background in like, this specific type of robotics? You mentioned you were in drones and things like that before, but
Not
what did
like
that look like?
this. Yeah, I think that was a pretty unique piece of HeroX. Living in Virginia, there's we're right outside of Washington D.C., so there's lots
Mhm.
of sort of government and military based robotic stuff, but there's no oil and gas to speak of anywhere near
Right.
here. I'm the only one I know of in this area that works in oil and gas.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unique. So I've done lots of robotics and drone projects for sure, but certainly nothing operating in crude oil or high viscosity environments. And I think that was sort of a unique part of HeroX, sort of its ability to bring these challenges to groups you might not traditionally expect. and solutions can come from these unexpected places, and certainly a solution from a group in Virginia would qualify as unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's always been our mentality here. And, you're living proof of that exact, mentality, working, because we truly do believe, the best ideas can come from anywhere and everywhere, places you least expect it. And, I'm sure these companies were probably expecting something to come out of Texas or, somewhere where it's a lot more common, but it's fantastic to see, you guys doing so well. So what, when you guys sat down and you saw the challenge and you were getting ready to, come up with a solution, what did that process look like for yourself? And did you have a team at that point?
Yeah, we didn't have a team at that point, and sort of we came together as a result of the challenge. And I think a key thing, and this goes back to the early days, that challenge trying to use drone technology to stop rhino poaching, trying to use technology to help people with physical disabilities. I think a key thing that was done in this challenge, and many of the challenges on HeroX, is there's just an amazing, impactful story, and that story is sort of what is the initial catalyst for bringing a team together. And I think that was really what got things going for us, was that story, bringing the team together as a result of that. And so we formed the company around the HeroX challenge and the win for this. So that was how it got started.
That's fantastic. And still the same team you're working with today.
Yeah, same, and it's grown. It's just myself and a co-founder, and so we came up with it, and just the two of us, and now we've been hiring and have a full. This was sort of a weekend submission. We just kind of doing it on the side for fun and see where it goes. And since then, now we have a 4,000 square foot R&D office, and 5 employees, and partnerships with some of the biggest oil and gas majors in the world. So it's grown up quite a lot since then.
That's incredible. Life comes at you fast. So what were you doing at the time when this was just kind of a weekend project for you?
Same type of work. So I was doing engineering consulting work for, again, early stage, high risk, robotics, drone type of solutions, but I was doing it for for hire, right? And so most of these companies don't have quite the story that's here. It's more like, hey, we're trying to get 10% better efficiency on something or other, improve our bottom line here or there.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, fun work, but it doesn't quite have the same gravitas as something like this, where you're like, hey, if you're able to make this work, you fundamentally change an industry, safety, the environmental impact. There's something like 2,000 confined space hours that go into this, and that's really dangerous work, having to go into these tanks and scoop all this stuff out, and the environmental remediation, if you can get rid of all of that. So there's a really impactful story there that was interesting. So from a technical perspective, it was very much the same, but sort of the reasons why we're doing it and how we bring people onto the team very much buy into this storyline that we're fundamentally changing an industry and the environment.
Yeah, I love hearing you say that, because we actually did a study with Harvard to kind of better understand what really drives our innovator community, because obviously it kind of just seems like that prize incentive, the monetary value, like what you're going to win, would make sense to be the biggest driver. But what we found out was the biggest thing was people being a part of something bigger, their contributions making a big impact on the world or something important, and really their connectivity to that story that you just mentioned. So we would never discriminate against somebody trying to host a prize challenge if they didn't have a fantastic story. But I think, as you mentioned, you can tell on our platform, we do have a lot of those really incredible sponsors hosting some pretty fantastic challenges that I think a lot of our community really relates to, and it kind of just drives them to really submit some incredible solutions.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was certainly the case with us. It was the the storyline that really was the draw more than the money. If it was just pure
Mhm.
money, and again, a company trying to pad their bottom line or something,
Yeah.
certainly we wouldn't have applied. It's
Yeah.
highly unlikely. So.
That's amazing. So when you and your co-founder sat down to kind of start tackling this, this challenge, what was the process? Like, what process did you take to create this new innovation, and what does that look like now that you have a team behind you? Has your innovation process changed at all?
Yeah, I think it hasn't changed too much. Yeah, I think again, the first thing is about creating the team and having that buy-in and having that storyline. So that's the first thing for us, and I think we still do
Mhm.
that to this day. So, we spend a lot of time engaging a lot of the oil and gas majors, trying to understand the storyline, and that shapes a lot of what we do.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the things we do on the engineering side day to day were really shaped by the conversations we have with the customers.
Mhm.
Um, and I think in terms of innovation, um, it really starts with having a diverse team as well. If you start with if you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail type of thing. And the same thing,
Mhm.
if your entire team is comprised of, say, programmers, then the solution is always there's an app for that. So
Yeah.
we work really hard to make sure we kind of have a diverse group that's
Mhm.
giving input. And I think the next piece is um, making sure you have a safe place to fail. And I think failure is a really important part of innovation. And you see a lot of companies where failure of any kind is really frowned upon, and can really impact your career. And I think innovation really struggles in that environment.
Yeah.
So a key philosophy here is, really it's not failure, it's really more learning opportunities. So
Right.
creating a space where everyone can have their ideas, explore those ideas. And the trick to that is, the constraint you try and put on it is to kind of fail fast. Have an
Mhm.
idea, let's be bold, let's try some radical new things, but let's sort of break it down into the key pieces. And let's do a little CAD, some 3D printing, and let's make something really fast, try it and see where it happens. So the solution we have was probably the 50th thing we had tried. So it took a lot of failing fast in order to get where we're at. So I think
Yeah.
those are some of the keys of how we innovate today.
Well, it sounds like you've created an incredible, culture and environment for yourself and your team. And, it's no wonder you gravitated to HeroX, because I feel like you share a lot of the similar values that we have on our team. I hear
Mhm.
our CEO talk about failing fast all the time,
Yep.
try lots of things, but figure out if it works or doesn't work quickly so we can, move on to the next thing. And it's really interesting about your comment on the diverse teams, because my last guest actually was in the aerospace industry,
Hmm.
and she builds kind of like their tech scouting team, and like travels the world finding different startups to develop whatever their internal innovation goals are. And that's one of the main things she focuses on is diversity. She wants to make
Yep.
sure that she's getting different perspectives from genders, ethnicities, different parts of the world, like career paths, everything. She wants to make sure um, you're getting input, like diverse input. And
Absolutely.
I think that's another great strength about crowdsourcing, because you're getting input from all over the world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's astonishing where some of the solutions end up coming from sometimes. And I think it again goes back to that originally. How if you have a powerful story, it's amazing. People there's so many amazing people that are just looking for opportunities to have an impact. And if you can create a story and give them an opportunity to do that, it's amazing who steps up and will send submissions for you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I know you have already kind of mentioned the number of benefits that have come from you competing in these prize challenges. And I've connected with a few of our other innovators that have competed, and in some instances actually haven't even won the challenge yet, but they were just so happy with the fire it lit under their team to really bring themselves together, start like formulating their thoughts and kind of coming together in the same direction and putting a solution together that's more viable than what they had before. So where I'm kind of going with this is I think there's a lot of additional benefits that can come from a prize challenge. Did you notice anything along those lines? Obviously, it created a team for you, but is there anything else you can share that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive difference. So the traditional way of kind of doing this is, you have an idea, you form a team, you work towards an MVP, and then once you have an MVP, you try and engage industry and start some pilot programs or some, early sales and see how it goes. And that's sort of your first introduction to the customer and their feedback, right? And that's a tough proposition because not having that customer input in the early stages and that buy-in in the early stages, you're taking some guesses as to what
You don't
industry
really
really
know.
wants and where the value proposition is and what the product market fit is. So this really flips the script on this, and you start off with a customer baked into your process. You have money baked into your process, and in the case of the Petronas challenge, the storage tank challenge, Petronas is a world leader in oil and gas, and so having them and their input early on, and we would have some ideas like, hey, we think this is what we would do. And like, no, that's not where the value is. That's not going to work. And so having that feedback early on really stopped us from going down some paths that kind of led nowhere. And we were able to keep going where the customer wanted. And the challenge really baked that customer in for us. So that was a huge advantage over where most people are going to start. So I think that was a big key. And then again, you have the money, and it lets you get to some milestones that allow you to get your next set of funding, right? As amazing as these challenges are, the amount of the award that you're winning typically is you generally have to bring in a little additional money in order to actually commercialize the solution, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a starting point.
Yeah, and generally when you go out and try and raise, angel investment money or venture capital money or whatever it is, bootstrap, whatever you're trying to do, they're always looking for that customer engagement. That's the key metric to raising money, and
you already have it.
And you already have it baked in from day one, and that's just that doesn't normally happen, and so that's a really fundamental difference here for sure.
Yeah, that's huge, and it's so funny, all the prize challenges I've been involved in, and we've seen come through HeroX, but I've never really heard or thought of it like that, where you're really just flipping the script on how traditional business is done. You're saving like so much money and time from a startup perspective, like you mentioned, not going down paths that ultimately won't lead you anywhere. And then also from a sponsor and organizational standpoint, they're saying, okay, this is what we need. We know we need it, like, and providing that guidance to make sure that their partners are producing the results that are going to impact the solutions they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, normally you're trying to guess what industry wants and hope it gets some traction. Here, industry has straight come to you and said, hey, this is the need, exactly how we need it. And if you can solve this problem, it's worth a lot of money. And here's, other than the money, here's the impact. Here's what the world is now, and here's what the world can look like if you solve this problem. And and so that's very attractive.
Forgive me because I'm not overly familiar with the oil and gas industry, because it sounds like you're working with a number of competitors ultimately, like the biggest companies in the industry. So what's that like, working alongside multiple different organizations and producing a solution that I assume all of them will have access to if it works?
Yeah, so there's the reason this came up on the HeroX platform was you can go to every single oil and gas major, Phillips 66, Exxon, Shell, Chevron, BP, name your company. They all tried to develop a robotic solution for this, and they all failed spectacularly. And so that was why all of the traditional ways of sort of developing it internally didn't work. And that was sort of how it ended up on HeroX. So we're really the first who's been able to actually have a robot propel and maneuver in the sludge and sediment. So this is sort of a unique thing.
Mhm.
but it's so there's no one else really competing with us on like the robotics side of this.
Right.
But it is pretty wild to have a tiny company of 5 people. And, I've been out to, Exxon's, 200-acre campus that has like an optometrist and a pharmacy like on the campus. And, they've got Formula One cars laying around and, just
Wow.
wild things like this. And out to Phillips 66 headquarters. And so to be a tiny company and have this type of engagement with big industry is pretty surreal, really.
Yeah, that's very cool. And it's obviously this is a major industry problem that you mentioned everybody's tried and failed at. But sometimes the hesitation we find with organizations in kind of getting into crowdsourcing is they're really concerned about keeping their cards close to their chest. They don't want like their competitors to know what they're innovating around, what
Hmm.
solutions they might get, and things like that. So I just think it's fantastic to kind of see like all of these big names be like, hey, this is something we all need to solve
Hmm.
together, and let's come together and make it happen.
Yeah, it's a for us, it's been a universal problem. Every
Mhm.
single company faces the same problems with the VOC release, with the same safety issues, with the same cost problems.
Mhm.
So we've had a lot of success in these oil and gas majors willing to sort of share information and work together because it is a
Yeah.
shared problem, and none of them really view it as, hey, we're going to develop this internally and sort of silo it and try and use this as a competitive advantage. They more recognize, hey, this is just a universal problem in the industry,
Yeah.
and we'd love to see it fixed.
Yeah.
So we haven't
I guess.
had anyone trying to sort of silo information.
mm, well, I guess that probably would come back to the fact, that you mentioned it's not just an organization just trying to like, work on their bottom line.
Yep.
They have a story around it. It's something bigger than
Yep.
saving 10% or whatever.
Exactly.
So, you're obviously extremely experienced in many different types of open innovation, hosting those megathons yourself and going back 10 years to the rhino poaching and now being successful on the HeroX platform. What advice would you have for new innovators that might be somewhat hesitant about competing in prize challenges or kind of on the fence about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, uh, first of all, your odds of winning these things are probably better than you think. So
Mhm.
if just from a sort of odds perspective, I would absolutely encourage people to do this. But even if you aren't sure if you're going to win, I think just going through the exercise is uh, it's worthwhile. If you've got an idea, all of the questions in basically all of these innovation challenges are exactly the questions you need to do in order to build a company, in order
Mhm.
to raise money, in order to attract customers, and do all of the things you have to do in order to actually turn an idea into a product and commercialize it. And
Mhm.
so it's a fantastic exercise at just sort of understanding the market, your business, your idea, and it really is it's just an amazing thought experiment. And if it never becomes more than that, then that it is what it is. But
Yeah.
I just the fact of applying is sort of that first step towards creating your next project, or becoming an entrepreneur, or leaving where you're
Mhm.
doing now and moving into that next thing. And again, even if you don't win, you sort of have the foundational information to take it and actually do something with it. So I think it's very worthwhile applying.
Yeah, that's so true. We spend a lot of time working with our sponsors to really design the challenges in that way to make sure that we're asking all the right questions that are thought provoking, making sure that they're leading our innovators in the direction of success for themselves, but ultimately our sponsors as well. So it's always great to hear that it lands that way from your side of the platform as well.
And I guess the other point on that is, I would strongly encourage people to use the storyline in the challenge, which are often quite powerful. And if you don't
Mhm.
already have a team, use that as a foundation to put together a team. I
Mhm.
think there's, in my experience, the judges are going to view teams more favorably than individuals. And I think having more perspectives on this, we were talking earlier, is valuable. And I think it also creates some accountability. If you say, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and the other person is sort of holding you accountable and you're holding them accountable, it's more likely to be you're more likely to finish the application and have a quality application.
Yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion. And if you are listening to this as an individual thinking of getting into a prize challenge, don't let that discourage you. There have been many teams that actually have formulated on our platform. There's forums on every challenge that you can chat and meet people. So you never know, you could meet your fellow co-founder right there on the platform. So alternatively, would you have any advice for an organization that might be hesitant about running a prize challenge? As I mentioned, sometimes there's a lot of internal hurdles where organizations can just kind of get stuck in that traditional way of innovating or doing business.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit. I think the main thing for some of these challenge sponsors is really, don't be afraid to think big and create a compelling story. I think that compelling story really is what's going to drive people to you. And I think if you're able to create that story that says, hey, here's this big problem, and it fundamentally changes the world in this way, you'd be amazed at how many people come out of the woodwork to be a part of that. And they're going to come from all over the place, from these completely unexpected places. Again, you mentioned earlier, if you're trying to do innovation in the oil and gas industry, you're probably going to land in Houston, and there's a couple spots there you're going to go, and everyone's going to that same place, right? And so if you really want to drive some of this innovation, how do you get the reach to go to these unexpected places? And I think that having that powerful story along with HeroX's reach, I really think it's a pretty powerful thing, and you'd be amazed at what can come of it.
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir, but it's certainly what we believe as well. And it's always nice to kind of see the proof come to life. And your success story is incredible. So I really appreciate you sharing it with myself and our audience as well. And I hope it inspires more innovators to take that jump, and more sponsors to kind of dip their toe in the world of crowdsourcing and innovation. But I think we're just about at time here. So I just want to thank you again. Your story is so extraordinary, everything you've done from in the past 10 years, and then obviously your success on the platform. We're thrilled to have you as a part of the HeroX community, and I'm really looking forward to following your journey and seeing the difference you're going to make in the oil and gas industry.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for everyone else who joined in for Fred and I's conversation today. Keep your sights on him and Applied Impact Robotics as they're disrupting the oil and gas industry. If you can find him in the company on the company website or directly on LinkedIn. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn as well, or reach out anytime at possibilities at HeroX.com. Again, my name is Adam Olsen, and I'm always happy to continue innovation conversations beyond the podcast. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.